we're starting with this episode a series on game theory. So many people know what game theory is. Game theory is basically a way of modeling a situation that you're in so that you're able to make an informed decision that's often based on math and statistical models that will help us to really understand what the different outcomes could potentially be based on what we choose to do in the situation. Going into Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, what we find is all these different factions have all these different reasons to do what they're doing. Everybody has different pieces of the whole puzzle, but they're found in what we call in game theory, and I think is basically the simplest possible game theory model to understand if you're new to game theory. You can skip ahead if you're not, but I think Prisoner's Dilemma, which is one of the suite of models, there's not a fixed number of models in game theory. They're ever developing, but there are kind of like classic use case models that we find that they're patterns that exist over and over and over again in the world around us. And the prisoner's dilemma, in the simplest form, is just you have two prisoners, and each one has the choice to either cooperate or throw the other one under the bus. If they choose to cooperate, then both of them will go free. If one of them throws the other one under the bus and the other one tries to cooperate, then, only one of them wins. Or if they both try to throw the other one under the bus, then neither of them wins. And it's a lose-lose situation for the prisoners. The issue is that, there's not a lot of trust. So maybe one prisoner's like, yeah, I'm going to go in front of the warden or the DA or whatever, and I'm going to say that you're innocent, and if you just tell them I'm innocent, then we're good to go. But the problem is, where's the trust? That when that person actually does go in front of the warden, that's what they're actually going to say. And so what we normally see, and this is where the prisoner's dilemma is this rich problem for humans to solve, is that more often than not, one person tries to screw the other person over, and thus very little value is realized out of the situation because both basically backstab the other, and then both parties lose. And doesn't it kind of feel like this prisoner's dilemma situation is kind of like this AI situation with the entity that we find ourselves in this movie, Brian?
Yeah. If we think about game theory as a framework for dealing with imperfect information, right? You mentioned trust, and we certainly don't have that at the beginning of this movie. At the beginning of this movie, the second scene where they're in the boardroom with all the intelligence directors, they're sort of explicitly saying, like, all the countries, even the ones that used to be allies, are not talking to each other about this. So everybody's in it for themselves, and everybody is mistrusting each other and just trying to win on their sort of unilateral. And so you end up with sort of this mutually assured destruction situation, right? Where everybody's terrified and therefore, grasping for as much leverage as they can get. And in the framework of this silly movie, it's because there's this mysterious AI entity that none of them can control collectively, or none of them can trust, none of them can understand. And it's sort of a proxy for problem that we always have as humans of, we can't see what's going on inside of other people's heads, and we need to plan our own actions based on what we think they're going to do. And so the prisoner's dilemma is the default behavior is to assume that they're going to act selfishly, and so we act selfishly. And the more people do that, the more that becomes the natural way of behaving. In this movie, at the beginning of this movie, everybody in the world, except maybe Ethan Hunt's team, is acting selfishly, is assuming the worst of everyone else, and is trying to take care of only themselves. And we have this very dramatic standoff among the world powers, and we have this power play where everybody is desperately going after the MacGuffin, which turns out to be a little magical key that can unlock the power to controlling this entity. So it's a fun setup for a movie, but like you said, it's also a real thing where we are all in this world of not trusting anyone to collaborate, not trusting anyone to be interested in collective benefit. And so everybody's out for individual benefit. Everybody's out for being on the winning side. And so going back to our original question, so they're all lying to each other. They're all hiding information from each other. They're all assuming that each other is lying to them. And we get a whole bunch of people wearing masks, and a whole bunch of people backstabbing each other, and a whole bunch of people sneaking in and out of places and trying to arrange shooting at each other, which is the action movie standard fare.
Yeah, hence this modified prisoner's dilemma that we find ourselves in, where every single party cannot trust the other parties and they are going to go with the backstabbing option. Like you said, thus they must put on masks and they must do the whole charade in order to try to get the upper hand. The sad part, though, is that, and I know this is very idealistic, if the parties who had some sort of a shared interest, which clearly some of these parties have a shared interest. I mean, all of the parties that aren't Gabriel have a shared interest in Gabriel not getting the thing, right? Him and the entity. So if they all just cooperated, it's like if everybody just put their chips in, it's very likely that they'd be able to overcome the opposition. But because they don't trust each other, they instead go with the backstab.
Right. Well, and I think that the framing device of making it an AI that's the enemy is an exaggerated version of that. We can't figure out what's going on in other people's heads, and so we don't trust them, right? Like the AI is by definition unknowable and by definition superior, and it's taken away all of our technological tools, and so we can't trust the facts that we have in the world around us, and we can't trust the cameras, and we can't trust the traffic lights, and we can't trust the satellites. Like all of these things are, that we had come to rely on as structure. It's an amped up version, like you said, of a counterparty that you can't have insight into their motivations, or you don't trust their motivations, and so therefore you have to act selfishly. Seems like the prudent thing to do. And so we have, like I said, everybody in the movie, with the possible exception of our hero and his crew, are acting out of selfishness and fear, which is one of our leadership lessons that we keep circling back to, right? That's rarely the basis for a magnanimous leadership role.
Yeah, but how do we navigate this prisoner's dilemma, Brian? And that practically, whatever prisoner's dilemma, similar situation you might find in your own life, heck, it could literally be the AI arms race in the world at large, where companies, instead of collaborating in order to put in place safe AI, everybody is kind of trying to take advantage of the situation and quickly get ahead in terms of technology, which puts the actual world and society at risk. Brian, as we move forward, let's talk about what solutions we have to some of these prisoners' dilemmas.